I'm Alison Cahn. I live at Lancaster Cohousing in Halton, and I moved in when we first opened in 2012.
I'm Chris Coates. I also live here. I'm one of the I actually describe myself as a former founder member on the basis that I'm not founding anything anymore, I'm just a member. My background is in the construction industry. I'm a carpenter. I also have a background in other sorts of what is now called community-led housing. I lived in a small housing cooperative in Burnley. That had grown out of the squatting movement in the late 1970s, been set up by ex-squatters looking for cheap property, and set up a successful small housing co-op for people with no money, essentially. It was partly my background in the co-op movement that we latched onto this Danish Scandinavian model of co-housing.
There were a few things that attracted me to it. Partly the idea of knowing your neighbours. When my father died, my parents had been married 60 years and my mother was terribly lonely, and she was living in a street she'd lived in for 25 years. But I realised that our streets and our society isn't designed for you to bump into your neighbours, for you to mix with your neighbours. And I could phone her at the end of the day and she wouldn't have spoken to anybody. And I thought, that's not how I want to live.
It's a particular architectural sort of driven idea where you design the houses to maximise what Alison was talking about, that social interaction. So you keep traffic to the edge of the site, so you don't have access to your front door from your car. You have to park in a car park to one side, and it's pedestrianised. That makes it safe to stand around for kids to play on what we call the street. In some ways the houses are slightly back to front. All our kitchens face onto the pedestrian way, with the idea that people do a lot of work in their kitchen and you'll see people walking by, you'll be able to sort of see what your kids are doing in the street.
We've got communal facilities. We all have our own kitchens and we have our own houses. They might be a bit smaller than an average house, but we've got everything we need in our house. But there's also a common house and there's a big catering kitchen. We've also got a communal bike shed, a children's room. We've got 2 guest rooms, so you've got, even if you've only got a very small 1-bedroom flat, you've got somewhere to put your guests. We have a communal laundry, like we've got our own laundrette. We've got letterboxes opposite the common house. So you have to leave your house to do stuff you need to do for daily living, and you'll bump into your neighbours.
Yeah, people often comment that it feels very, very Mediterranean, and I think that is because it's a smaller scale than most people's streets. I mean, we haven't got sort of 20, 30 yards across the road to the next house, and it's all on a sort of
street.
People live on the street. Yeah. It is a different way to live.
The house is a passive house, which means they're very, very energy efficient. And that's because there's a lot of insulation, they're airtight, and they've got big windows towards the sun, very basically. Our fuel energy use is 15% of what you'd be in a normal home. And electricity use is 30%. So that's a lot that you save. We've also got renewable energy, so we've got a district heating system run on biomass, which means we have one big boiler that pipes hot water around the whole site. We have solar panels and we have solar thermal. And there's also a community-owned hydro on the river that supplies our electricity. So it's all renewable, locally produced energy. But the other part that I think which has been more important than we expected is the kind of eco side of sharing, in that we have 4 washing machines among 40 houses. We have a community car club because we share cars. We have a community food co-op. The mill where we're sitting is a community-led workspace. If we need anything, if I need a drill or a tent or anything really, I just go on the WhatsApp group and someone brings it to my door. So I buy very little now. So there's all sorts of ways that sharing actually means you can use less resources.
In terms of construction, the houses are remarkably normal. I talked to the contractors when we were doing the build and say, do you understand what we're trying to do? And they said, yes, you're just asking us to do our job properly. You're trying to do good insulation, you're trying to build to a good standard, good quality housing, and yeah, we understand it. You have to pay a decent rate for it, but it's not out of this world. You're not paying a huge premium for really good quality housing and really low bills.
There's something like a 10% addition on the cost for this really, really
5 to 10%.
5 to 10. But you'll get that back within about 20 years from lower bills, and actually faster because the price of energy is going up.
It all grew out of initially a self-build group, people who wanted to actually physically build their own houses. We looked at all sorts of different sites, even thought of buying a big house, knocking it down and building a sort of little housing estate in a big garden. And every time we looked at things, another developer would come along and just have more money than we did. And it was out of that there was a very small group of people who said, can't we work out a way that we could compete with developers? The only way we could imagine doing it was to think bigger. Stop thinking that we need to find lots of people who can actually build a house, sort of plumbers and carpenters and things, but people who would like a nice house, have got some money, and think like grand designs, self-build in the way that people don't actually do the work on grand designs, they get somebody else in, but they've had an input into designing it and choosing the location and things. So once we did that, we suddenly found there were a lot of people who fancied living in a well-insulated, nice house.
I came and I thought, these guys are going to make it happen, guys and women, you know, this group, because they knew what they were talking about, and a lot of what they knew was not stuff I knew. So you do need those skills, and so you need to have the resources to hire in those skills in some way, and hire in people probably who have skills with kind of group dynamics and how you get groups to gel and how you get groups to decide. The architects involved people in various aspects of the design, and we were the clients. You know, we were the developers, basically. We appointed the architects and the builders, so you have a lot of control over it.
I've been working with another group of over 55s on a project literally on the next door site to here, and trying to work out a model that is a sort of hybrid of what we did here and will deliver in fact 30% of the units will be affordable. So some of them will be rented at affordable housing benefit levels, and some of them will be discounted market value. And that is going to be a balance based on the fact that we're aiming at providing something that developers aren't providing, which is accommodation for older people. And a lot of them can actually have actually got a larger house to cash in. So what we're looking at is essential cross-subsidy, using the funding that people who can afford to buy a house to help provide accommodation for people who can't. I can't see why that wouldn't work in other parts, in other areas. And the City Council have got an officer whose job it is to help people try and come up with ideas for this, to get a group off the ground and find a site, engage people. There's
also a community land trust that's next door to the Senior Cohousing project that has also got some government grants and help from the City Council. And they're all affordable housing. And both sets are building to passive house standard. That's very high eco standards. In America, they actually have kind of developer-led co-housing. They have developers who have made a business out of helping co-housing groups get off the ground. And they know about design and collaborative design, and they know about consensus decision making, and they know about how to build groups. They're usually in it because they really believe in this kind of housing. So although it's a business, it tends to be more of a social enterprise, people who have commitment. So that's again another model.
We started when lots of people hadn't heard of community-led housing. Nobody, when we knocked on the door of the planning department, knew what a co-housing project was at all. That's different now. The local authorities can see the advantages. You then start to get the support, and I think that is now what is happening in this country. Central government have recognised it, have started pushing money out to see if they can make it happen in various places. Local councils have started looking at it and are now prepared and have got some funding to give support to people. Lancaster City Council picked some up about 4 or 5 years ago. They got a whole tranche of money just to try and stimulate community-led housing in the area. I think we're now seeing seeds of that being sort of feelers being put out by local councils. How do we make this happen? How do we support people in their own communities to build housing that community needs? And there's no reason it can't be done in Morecambe. In fact, there are lots of reasons why it could be done in Morecambe, actually. I think there's a difficulty that's not really recognised in this, in the people who've got the least time to do this sort of thing are people who are just struggling to make ends meet. Finding that time to get it off the ground, I think that is a bigger question mark against how you can do it than whether you can get people excited about it, I think you can, or whether you can get support from the council. Go down the pub, sit round a table and talk to people. That's how we started. We knew each other, and a couple of us had been trying this self-build project, but essentially we just started talking to people, going, would you be interested in this? And when we felt there were enough people wanting to do that, we just called a meeting. And then we looked further afield. But before we did that, the 5 of us went, so what do we think it looks like? What do we think is actually doable in Lancaster? Do we think there's potential sites? Took us 5 years to find a site. How do we think we're going to get enough money to do it? And do we have a list of things that we personally want to get out of it?
You do have to commit quite a lot of energy to it. I think it's working out what you're looking for. I mean, I'm sure there are ways to do co-housing that is more affordable, and we haven't really got to that yet. So part of it is just imagining and having ideas and thinking, what's there that I could take advantage of?
I mean, there's a particular tension between having a dream of what it might be like and the practicalities of what is possible, and somewhere in between, those two have got to meet. I think there's a lot more support than there was when we started. I mean, very basic support, like money to pay to hire a room to have a meeting, money to produce leaflets. I mean, the sort of thing that we were dipping into our pockets and going, okay, well, if we want to see it happen, we have to pay for it. But that support is available now from small grants from the council to get you off the ground, because they can see that otherwise it is only people who've got some money who are ever going to afford this.
There's quite a lot of poor housing stock. And I know the council is interested in getting more social housing and council housing, is there a way that your group can say, we can take some of this poor housing stock and we can turn it into something that that is affordable, or social housing and is community-led housing that you really want, and we can help do it for you, but we need you to support us and maybe give us the house. There are some win-wins that are possible, but it's thinking about, and particularly with the council that's there at the moment, who are really interested in all this stuff and really interested in housing and wanting to have more social housing. There's a real opportunity. And I think the other thing is understanding that you can do this stuff. One of the things I've really learned from being here is that you can do things. These things are possible, and it's interesting because they're almost like motherhood and apple pie. Whatever political persuasion you are, people like community-led housing. That gives you a big advantage.
It's not just the council's job to work out how to change that dynamic. We all have a responsibility to try and include as many people as possible. I mean, I've gone from being a squatter, or on the verge of being homeless, to being a property, what in essence is a property developer. We developed 41 houses. If you'd have told the sort of young 20-year-old squatter that that's what you'd be doing at sort of 40 years on, I would have gone, you must be joking. Where am I going to find the resources to do that? We're scrabbling around to just put a roof over our heads. But that's the journey I've gone on. Okay, we've had all sorts of support from families, and because we bought houses at the right time. But that doesn't mean that there isn't another way it can be done, with some support from the government, with support from other community-led housing groups. We've always, from the beginning, wanted to be able to work out ways we could sort of inspire other people, or just go and tell them how we did it, support them.
So we're a resource. You know, if people want a resource, there's a resource on their doorstep.
Yeah, I mean, we're very happy for people to come and look round. If they want to use our facilities for gatherings, meetings, yeah, come and talk to us.